All right. Hi, Albert. How you doing?
How are you?
Great. So thanks for the last session. We saved the best for last. So it's really going to be fun to spend 25 minutes with Dr. Albert Bourla, who's CEO of Pfizer. I'm Geoff Meacham. I'm the senior biotech and pharmaceutical analyst here. And I know, Albert, at this meeting we've been talking a lot about mRNA and the deployment, of technologies. But I do want to first talk a little bit about COVID and maybe just give us an update. You're obviously uniquely qualified to talk about this. One of the questions is, as the pandemic transitions from pandemic to endemic, and Pfizer has done amazing things on both the vaccine and the oral front. How do you see your life cycle management strategy sort of evolving? Is it the same playbook, in 2022, but maybe a different one in 23? How do you envision kind of the dual vaccine and oral strategy kind of playing out?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great honor for me to speak to this event. Let's try to imagine how COVID is evolving. And clearly no one has a crystal ball, but there are some scenarios that are more likely than the others. And absent a new variant that is changing dramatically the rules of engagement, if, let's say, we stay with the current sequence that we see, that variants are coming and going, I think the future likely looks like the one that I'm going to describe right now. From one hand, the virus will be with us. Very few viruses were eradicated in the history of humanity completely. And that one doesn't look like they will be the one that we can make it. It is endemic. It is basically everywhere in the world, which makes it very difficult, the eradication. Has the ability to mutate, which means that creates constant challenges to the immune system so that will not be able to protect against it. And has one very unique characteristic. The immune responses that it's producing, irrelevant if it is from natural infection, because you get COVID, or because it's a vaccination, they don't last very long. As a result, the virus, you can get infected by the virus while can get reinfected with the same or different variant several months later, or being infected even if you were vaccinated. So after the immune response is waning. So that's one of the characteristics of this virus. The second is that we have already entered into a phase of 2 years under severe social distancing measures, restrictions. It's very clear looking ahead. I think that the measures eventually will relax. From one hand, health authorities, they do have the tools to do it right now because there are effective treatments and effective vaccines, and there are vaccinations at very large proportions. But also there is a tremendous pressure. The society is willing to set the bar lower and go back to living our lives, even if that means more hospitalizations and eventually more deaths. So the combinations of those two things likely means that there will be waves of COVID that will be coming and going. The volumes of vaccines likely will not increase, actually will decrease. The compliance with the third or a fourth or a fifth dose, they are clearly less than what used to be with the first. Although right now we have very, very high numbers of compliance with the third dose. And this is quite encouraging with what can happen with the fourth. But still, I think that will go down. So also that will contribute to immune waning at population level. Looking at that, what does it mean for us as we're looking for the life cycle? When it comes to vaccines, I think that the world needs a vaccine that lasts longer. This is what will make sure that there will be compliance. This is what will make sure that people will get it. And an annual revaccination, I think right now it is the ideal one. A vaccine that can protect you through the year, it is what we are aiming to do. Technically, it's not that easy. It's challenging to do it. But we do have some important scientific leads, and we are pursuing this opportunity. Now, needless to say that that's in parallel with being able to chase the variants. Every time that there is a new variant, you need to adapt your vaccine to make sure that you are you're providing the best protection. But one thing it is to change the variant and have the same identical vaccine instead of the original strain with an Omicron, and a different thing it is to have an improved version of the vaccine that can last longer, and this is what we are working. When it comes to treatments, Paxlovid right now, it is very difficult again to beat. The efficacy is very high right now. I think all the work on life cycle management, it is coming to a new Paxlovid or a new oral treatment that will be easier to administer without ritonavir, or maybe once a day rather than twice a day. So these are right now our main goals, improving basically not the efficacy of both the vaccines and the treatments, not the safety of both the vaccines and the treatment, because they are quite high, but making them easier for people, more convenient for consumers to use them.
Just a follow-up to that, Albert, when you look at Pfizer's pricing strategy over the course of the pandemic, it was very innovative. You basically had a price that was correlated to GDP, and you ensured equal access. And so, as we transition from pandemic to endemic, how do you intend to sort of preserve that, especially as you see waves of outbreaks, and as you said too, more life cycle management strategies to come into play?
Yeah. Look, I mean, right now I don't focus at all on pricing, and every time I speak with price, I know it will become news on the media. So I try to avoid, because this is not what it is in my mind right now. The price that we implemented, both for treatments and vaccines, was a tier pricing based on the GDP. So high-income countries, one tier of prices, middle-income countries, a second tier of pricings, and the low-income countries, we gave it at cost. Actually, right now, when it comes to vaccines, we also ensure that we will find sponsors to take the cost of manufacturing. So to make sure that the poor countries will receive it completely free and not at cost. The US government bought from us 1 billion doses of vaccines that they are giving for free completely to the poorest countries of the world. There are around 90 plus countries in the world. At the same time, when it comes to our treatment, we provided royalty-free licenses to the Medicines Patent Pool. This is an organization that it is backed by the United Nations, and they take the license from us, and then they out-license to generic manufacturers. And that license that we gave, royalty-free, I repeat, will cover 90 plus countries, approximately 53% of the global population. So really, price was never an issue. And I want to also emphasize that we did the second almost miracle, I would call it, next to the very expeditious development of both the vaccines and the treatment, in terms of scaling up manufacturing at unprecedented levels. Just to give you a magnitude of what I'm talking about, before the pandemic, Pfizer was manufacturing 200 million doses of vaccines per year. That was our annual production across all our manufacturing sites and all our vaccines. Just in the first year of the pandemic, in 2021, we made 3 billion doses, billion, I repeat, of a vaccine that was never produced. So with that in mind, we were able to provide affordable prices for all and volumes that it will be enough for all in both treatments and vaccines. Right now, we are working for the next generations, but right now the goal is not to change, rather the tier pricing policy. It is to, as long as this is a government purchases through a pandemic business, I don't foresee major changes in the prices. It will be a very different story if we move into a private market at the end of the pandemic.
Great, that's helpful. Well, let's talk a little bit about the mRNA technology as a platform. So obviously, COVID was a highly unusual situation, but it was deployed pretty rapidly. And I wanted to ask you, what are the lessons learned from COVID that you could deploy into other infectious diseases? You've talked about flu, as has Moderna and others, but that, and then looking beyond flu and other indications.
Yeah. Let me take a step back and say there are a lot of lessons that we learned, not necessarily from the mRNA technology, for which I will come in a moment, but also in terms of how we do things. I was listening to your previous panel about the clinical trials, effectiveness and efficacy, and how we can do things faster and better. I think a great deal of knowledge was accumulated through our efforts to be able to develop in 8-9 months something that takes 8-9 years. Clearly, those learnings are learnings that needs to stay with us. If we were able to do it for a COVID vaccine, if we were able to do it for a COVID treatment, why not being able to do it for a cancer treatment? Why not be able to do it for atopic dermatitis treatment? So we need to bring all these learnings and in clinical development, and that will be agnostic in terms of therapeutic areas or technology that we're using. Now, going to mRNA. mRNA clearly is the technology of 2021. It is the one that came up and became extremely famous, allow me to say, popular, and rightly so, because of the way that mRNA was used. Millions of lives of people were saved, and billions, if not trillions, of financial outcomes were, let's say, or losses were evaded because of this technology. The technology clearly is not the holy grail. I don't think that the mRNA technology can be used for everything. But clearly, I think we only see the beginning of what the technology can provide. We are scratching the surface of what they provide. What will be the next generation of scientific applications based on this technology? Clearly, other vaccines. That's, I think, the lower hanging fruit right now. Vaccines of other infectious diseases, against other infectious diseases, that we do not have good results with the conventional technology so far. Flu, it is one that it is very well known that several companies, including us, we are pursuing by using the mRNA technology. The reason is because with flu, there is not great satisfaction right now in the world about the efficacy of the vaccines that they are in circulation. Usually, depending on the year, because this is very variable, this efficacy can be 20, 30, 40, 50%, but that's bottom. This is where it lasts. It's far away from the 80s and 90s that we have seen with mRNA technology. An additional benefit that will allow us to use mRNA in flu, it is that the mRNA is something that can condense the time that you need to produce a new variant vaccine. In flu, as you know, every year we have new variants. And the way that things works is that every year the WHO will announce which are the vaccines that, what's in the variants that the manufacturers should target. And then everybody is trying to make vaccines with these variants. This is a process that is happening typically 9-10 months before the season, because this is how much time you need to be able to produce a vaccine. So we have in many cases a mismatch between what we are predicting will be the dominant variant 10 months later, and what eventually the dominant variant will be, because we have to make this call many months before. With mRNA, in addition to its ability to produce better responses, hopefully, you have also the additional benefit that you can select the strain 3-4 months, really, before the season, which will provide the ability to have a better match. There are also other diseases, and multiple companies are looking into it. We have announced already our work to develop a shingles vaccine that could have hopefully very, very high efficacy, but also way better tolerability profile against the current solution. So vaccines of other infectious diseases is one of the areas that it is right now very hot. Another area for mRNA, it is the utilization of the technology to attack cancer. It is cancer vaccines, basically. More or less, the principle it is that you are using the mRNA to teach your immune system to attack your cancer cells, your tumor cells. This is something that scientists are working actually before trying to use the technology for vaccines. We haven't been able to see the first positive, we have seen a lot of positive data, but we haven't been able to see the first products yet, medicines yet. But I think if successful, things will become obvious in the next 2 to 3 years. And then there is a third way that is using this technology for genetic diseases, diseases that they are occurring because there is a mistake in the DNA sequence of the individual. Usually those diseases are untreatable right now because, again, they're part of your DNA, of who you are. This technology for the first time is giving us hope to believe that we can edit the mistake in your DNA sequencing and then give dramatic, hopefully, therapeutic results to patients that they are almost hopeless. So also ourselves, we are embarked into that. We are working with Beam Therapeutics in one of what we believe is the most promising technologies in gene editing, and we are targeting several targets right now. So more to come when we have more data.
Just along those lines, Albert, I have a question here from the audience. As you tackle other indications beyond COVID or even beyond infectious diseases, do you have to modify the technology itself to enhance immunogenicity? We know that you can scale up, for example, for manufacturing, but are there tweaks that you make, that you perceive or that you envision making as you move to oncology or infectious or inflammation or perhaps even CNS diseases?
Oh, yes, there are a lot. First of all, let's start with the technologies that are mainly in use right now. It is the modified RNA. There are other forms of RNA in which we are very active right now. I will give you an example, the self-amplified RNA. Theoretically, you should be able to achieve way, way better immunogenicity responses by using a self-amplifying. You can achieve the same with way, way, way smaller doses. As a result, you can load significantly your dose to achieve, let's say, more impressive results. So that's just one of the examples. But even within, and there are cyclic RNA and there are other more forms that we are experimenting right now. But also within the same modified, for example, RNA, there are different technologies that we are thinking to implement so that we can enhance significantly the results that you can get from this modified RNA to get way better results. And I refer a little bit when I spoke that we are looking to make sure that we enhance the durability of the immune protection and hopefully move to a yearly vaccine.
And just along those lines, Albert, when you think about Pfizer's investment in mRNA technology has been substantial, but you also have been there in the field of gene therapy and cell therapy, and you have programs in hemophilia, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, et cetera. So maybe just help us with, what is Pfizer's longer-term strategy outside of mRNA technology to get broadly into the gene therapy, cell therapy field?
We are having investments in gene therapy, cell therapy field that they are going back many years. You mentioned 3 of our programs that they are in clinic right now, the hemophilia A, hemophilia B, and Duchenne muscular dystrophy. In fact, we announced recently that we are going back to Duchenne muscular dystrophy to enhance our clinical trial efforts. We have a significant manufacturing investment in this field. The bottleneck in a lot of the gene therapies is right now manufacturing. Manufacturing was happening in all technologies, rolling bottles basically, and not in big fermenters. That was not an issue when the gene therapies were targeting tissues like the eye, for example, when you need the very small quantities to be able to achieve the results. You can produce it basically on a lab scale. But when we start moving into targeting tissues like liver in hemophilia or the muscle even more in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, then you are in need of significant manufacturing capacity. And I think we have built that. That will allow us not only to be able to service our own programs in gene therapy, but equally important, to become the partner of choice for other companies that are working with gene therapies. I truly believe that the future of drug discovery lies with AI, which means moving in from drug discovery to drug design, and lies with partnership, which means that will come from a broad ecosystem that right now the company that will be able to position themselves as a partner of choice will be the company that will win in the innovation. So we do a lot of that in gene therapy. Also, I just mentioned that we are using the mRNA technology to be able to enter into gene editing, which is the next step for us. And that also clearly falls under this category, I think, of the cell or of the not gene therapy, but gene editing therapies.
And Albert, just along those lines, when you think about the investments that Pfizer could make internally to some of these technologies, it's substantial. But how do you balance, looking externally at a number of companies in this space? How do you build source of versus buy that type of discussion, especially knowing the substantial cash that you will have accumulated here on the back of the COVID vaccine and and your oral.
No, it's clearly that we are not only trying to do both, advance our entire internal portfolio, but and at the same time source science from the outside. But we try to do it in a way that one is synergistic with the other. This is why I spoke about the partner of choice. Look how the collaboration of a smaller biotech like BioNTech and a company like Pfizer was able to change the dynamics, not only of the world, but of the two companies, and particularly for the smaller player that was able to benefit substantially from the capabilities that were being on the table. We were able to develop very fast the clinical trials, to manufacture very fast, and eventually to commercialize on a global scale. We think we can do the same for most of the biotechs, for many of the biotechs that are out there. So the forms of collaboration doesn't have to be an outright acquisition, which many of them will happen, as it happened in the past until recently and will continue seeing, but also collaborations that they are much more dynamic partnerships that both parties, as they are successful, they are gaining significant benefits, and at the end of the day, the patients are gaining significant benefit. Right now, we have capital, so that will allow us, as we said, to be able to source approximately 25 billion of risk-adjusted revenues by year 2030 from the external world. And that not only we have the capital to do that, but clearly we have the capital to do that, plus dividends, plus buybacks, plus any other uses of capital, we will have flexibility to do. And we plan to continue doing it.